I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The old radio on my kitchen shelf was playing a sad bolero, the kind my husband Thomas used to love before he passed away 10 years ago. I glanced out the window as rain pattered against the glass, drops splattering all the way to my gas stove. Oh no, I murmured, closing the window quickly. The last thing I needed was the wind extinguishing the flame. Tonight's dinner was just for me. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, chopping vegetables for a simple beef stew, Thomas's recipe that I still made every Wednesday, more out of habit than anything else. My small kitchen in Montreal was modest but cozy, with its worn mosaic floor and the faded yellow curtains that had been hanging there since Joshua was a boy. At 62, I had grown comfortable with my quiet routines. After Thomas died, it was just me and occasional visits from my son Joshua. The clock on the wall read 8:45 p.m. when I heard the front door open, followed by the sound of wet shoes squeaking against the tile floor. "Mom!" Joshua's voice called out, sounding deeper and more strained than usual. I turned, wiping my hands on my apron. "In the kitchen, honey." Joshua appeared in the doorway, his tall frame seemingly weighed down by invisible burdens. At 35, he was the spitting image of his father, same dark hair, same thoughtful eyes, same strong jaw. But tonight, those eyes were bloodshot, his shoulders slumped forward. His expensive suit was soaked through from the rain, dark patches spreading across the light gray fabric. "You're drenched," I said, moving to help him with his coat. "Is everything all right?" He placed a cold hand on my shoulder, the rain from his sleeve dampening my blouse. "I'm exhausted. Mom, it's been a hell of a day at Horizon Tech." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "The Phillips deal is falling apart, and the board is breathing down my neck." As CEO of Horizon Tech, Joshua had built the company from the ground up, turning it into one of the region's leading technology firms. But success came with pressures I could only imagine. "I think I'm going to turn in early," he continued, his voice trailing off. "I have another meeting first thing tomorrow." I frowned, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "You should get out of those wet clothes first. You'll catch your death." He nodded absently, his gaze distant. "Yeah, I will." He leaned down and kissed my cheek. "Don't worry about me, Mom. I just need some sleep." I watched as he trudged up the stairs to his old bedroom, which I'd kept exactly as it was when he left for college. He still used it occasionally when he needed to escape from the demands of his life with Lauren Adams Clark, my daughter-in-law of 3 years. A beautiful, ambitious woman who worked as a marketing executive at Pinnacle Industries. She and Joshua lived in a sprawling house across town, the kind with marble countertops and a 3-car garage. I rarely visited Lauren made it clear that my homey aesthetic, as she called it, didn't quite match their modern lifestyle. I turned back to my cooking, but my mind was elsewhere. Something about Joshua seemed off. It wasn't just the exhaustion I'd seen that before. There was something in his eyes, a wariness that hadn't been there before. I wanted to go upstairs, sit on the edge of his bed like I did when he was a child, and ask what was really troubling him. But he was a grown man now, with his own burdens to carry. Instead, I stirred the stew and set the table for one. Joshua would probably be asleep by the time it was ready anyway. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm that usually brought me comfort. But tonight, it felt ominous, like a warning I couldn't quite decipher. I had just placed my bowl in the sink when the doorbell rang, its shrill sound cutting through the patter of rain. I glanced at the clock, almost midnight. Who would be visiting at this hour? My heart rate quickened as I wiped my hands on my apron and made my way to the front door. Through the peephole, I could see 2 figures in dark raincoats, water dripping from their brims. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. 2 police officers stood on my porch, their expressions somber. The taller one, a broad-shouldered African-American man with kind eyes and a stern mouth, removed his hat. Water dripped onto my welcome mat. "Mrs. Clark," he asked, his deep voice gentle but formal. "Yes," I replied, my hand instinctively tightening on the doorknob. "I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, Montreal Police Department." He gestured to his partner, an Asian-American officer who stood slightly behind him. This is Officer Mike Chen. May we come in? We need to speak with you. I stepped aside, my mind racing. Had something happened in the neighborhood? Was it about my neighbor's complaint about the overgrown tree in my yard? The officers removed their wet coats and followed me into the living room. Neither sat down when I offered them a seat. Lieutenant Rogers cleared his throat. Mrs. Clark, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. He paused, his expression softening. There's been an accident. A car went off Riverside Drive about an hour ago, crashed into the ravine, and exploded. My heart began to pound, but I didn't understand why they were telling me this. We've identified the vehicle as belonging to your son, Joshua Clark. He continued, his voice steady but compassionate. I'm very sorry to tell you that he died in the crash. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the back of the sofa to steady myself. That's impossible, I said, my voice surprisingly firm despite the tremor in my hands. My son is upstairs sleeping. He came home not long ago. Lieutenant Rogers and Officer Chen exchanged glances. Ma'am, are you certain? Rogers asked carefully. Of course I'm certain. I spoke with him myself. He was tired from work and went upstairs to rest. I pointed toward the staircase. He's in his old bedroom right now. Rogers nodded to Chen, who moved toward the stairs. If you don't mind, Mrs. Clark, we'd like to check. His tone was gentle, but left no room for refusal. This way, I said, leading them upstairs, my legs somehow carrying me forward despite the numbness spreading through my body. Outside Joshua's bedroom door, I knocked softly. Joshua, honey. No response. I knocked again, louder this time. Joshua, there are some police officers here. They need to speak with you. Still nothing. With a shaking hand, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The small bedside lamp cast a soft yellow glow across the room. On the bed was a shape under the covers, the outline of a person sleeping. See, I said, relief washing over me. He's right there, sleeping. But Lieutenant Rogers held out his arm, stopping me from entering. His other hand moved to his holster, and I saw him exchange a quick glance with Officer Chen. Mrs. Clark, please step back, he said, his voice low and tense. What, why? Please, just stay there. Something in his tone made me obey. I watched as he cautiously approached the bed, Chen right behind him. With a swift motion, Rogers pulled back the covers. There was no one there, just pillows and Joshua's jacket, arranged to look like a sleeping form. My knees buckled. Officer Chen caught my arm, steadying me. Mrs. Clark, when did you last see your son? Rogers asked, his voice now sharp with professional concern. Just a few hours ago, I insisted, my voice trembling. He came in from the rain. He spoke to me in the kitchen. He went upstairs to sleep. I looked wildly from the empty bed to the officers. I'm not making this up. Rogers holstered his weapon and stepped closer, his expression a mixture of concern and suspicion. Mrs. Clark, the car accident happened approximately 1 hour ago. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene. The vehicle registration and the wallet found in the wreckage both belonged to Joshua Clark. I shook my head vehemently. No, there must be some mistake. He was here. I saw him. I spoke to him. Rogers's gaze softened slightly. Sometimes in moments of extreme shock, our minds can play tricks on us. I am not imagining things. My voice rose, echoing in the small bedroom. My son was here. Chen spoke for the first time, his voice quiet. Ma'am, does your son have any identification with him? A driver's license, perhaps. I hadn't thought of that. His wallet would be in his coat pocket. He always puts it there when he comes home. We moved back downstairs to the coat rack by the door. Joshua's raincoat wasn't there. He was wearing it when he came in, I said, my voice growing smaller. He was soaked from the rain. Rogers looked at me with that same mix of compassion and doubt. Mrs. Clark, I understand this is incredibly difficult, but all evidence suggests that your son was in that car when it crashed. We'll need to conduct a formal identification. Of course. DNA, I said suddenly. Do a DNA test. That will prove whether it's Joshua or not. Rogers nodded. We can arrange that, though it will take some time. Do it, I insisted. Because I know my son, and whoever died in that car, it wasn't him. Lieutenant Rogers insisted I sit down while Officer Chen made me a cup of tea. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the mug. The heat from the ceramic seeped into my cold fingers, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled in my bones. "Mrs. Clark," Rogers began, sitting across from me, his notebook open. "I need to ask you some questions about tonight. It's important that you try to remember everything as clearly as possible." I nodded, gripping the mug tighter. "You said Joshua arrived home this evening. What time was that?" I thought back, trying to focus through the fog of shock. "Around 8:45, maybe 9 Haru. I was making dinner. And he spoke to you." "Yes. He said he was exhausted from work. Something about a deal falling apart. He said he had a meeting tomorrow morning and was going to bed early." Rogers made notes. "Did he seem different in any way, anxious, afraid, not himself?" I hesitated. "He was tired, more than usual. And," I searched for the right words, "there was something in his eyes, a kind of wariness, but I thought it was just stress from work. Had he mentioned any problems recently, personal or professional?" I thought about the past few weeks. Joshua's visits had become more frequent, but shorter. He would stop by, sometimes just for a few minutes, like he was checking on me rather than visiting. But there had been moments when I caught him staring out the window, lost in thought, a frown creasing his forehead. "Not specifically," I admitted. "But things haven't been quite right for a while." "What do you mean?" I sighed. "He and Lauren, his wife, they've been having some issues. Nothing he's talked about directly, but I could tell. He's been coming here more often, staying later." "What kind of issues?" I shook my head. "I don't know for certain. Joshua doesn't like to burden me with his problems." I hesitated, then added, "But Lauren can be demanding. She has very high expectations, for herself, for Joshua, for their lifestyle." Rogers nodded, continuing to write. "And what about professionally? Any problems at work?" "He mentioned something about a deal tonight, the Phillips deal. I think he called it—" "Said it was falling apart." Rogers's pen paused. "Phillips, Mark Phillips," I shrugged. "He didn't say a first name." Rogers and Chen exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. "Mrs. Clark, do you have a way to contact Lauren? We'll need to speak with her as well." I reached for my phone and dialed Lauren's number. It rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail. "She's not answering," I said, anxiety building in my chest. "That's not like her. She's always on her phone." Rogers took down the number. "We'll keep trying. In the meantime, is there anyone else who might know Joshua's whereabouts or recent activities, a close friend?" "Perhaps Jake Turner," I said without hesitation. "They've been friends since college. He works at Horizon Tech too." As Rogers jotted down Jake's information, my phone rang. My heart leapt, hoping it was Lauren, but the screen showed unknown caller. I answered anyway. "Mrs. Clark." It was a woman's voice, professional and detached. "This is Dr. Patel from the County Medical Examiner's office. I'm calling about the preliminary DNA results." I put the phone on speaker so Rogers could hear. "We've compared the sample from the deceased to your DNA sample taken earlier." Dr. Patel continued. "I can confirm that the deceased individual from the vehicle is not your biological son." The relief that flooded through me was so intense I nearly dropped the phone. "I told you," I said to Rogers, tears springing to my eyes. "It's not Joshua." Rogers's expression shifted, his professional skepticism giving way to focused concern. "Thank you, Dr. Patel. We'll follow up." He ended the call and turned to me. His demeanor completely changed. "Mrs. Clark, I owe you an apology. You were right. So who died in that car?" I asked. "And where is my son?" Rogers stood, his posture straight and determined. "That's what we're going to find out. As of this moment, we're officially opening a missing persons investigation for Joshua Clark." The next morning, I sat in the passenger seat of Lieutenant Rogers' unmarked police car as we pulled into the parking lot of Horizon Tech. The company's sleek glass headquarters reflected the morning sun, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I had barely slept, my mind racing with questions and fears. If Joshua wasn't in that car, where was he, and who had I spoken to in my kitchen last night? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that something about Joshua had been off, his voice a little different, his mannerisms not quite right. How could I have missed it, Mrs. Clark? Rogers's voice pulled me from my thoughts. We're here. Are you ready? I nodded, smoothing down my simple blue dress. I felt out of place even before we entered the building. Lauren had once commented that my wardrobe was charmingly vintage, her tone making it clear that vintage was just a polite word for outdated. The lobby of Horizon Tech was all chrome and glass, with a massive digital display showcasing the company's latest innovations. The receptionist, a young woman with a sleek ponytail, looked up as we approached. Good morning. Welcome to Horizon Tech. How may I help you? Her professional smile faltered when she recognized me. Oh, Mrs. Clark. We weren't expecting you. Is everything all right? Before I could answer, Rogers stepped forward, showing his badge. Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, Monte Real Police. We need to speak with someone regarding Joshua Clark. The receptionist's eyes widened. Is Mr. Clark okay? He hasn't come in today, and he missed the Phillips meeting this morning. It's not like him at all. Rogers maintained his professional demeanor. We're looking into that. Is there someone who works closely with Mr. Clark that we could speak with? Sophia Martinez, his executive assistant. She replied promptly. She'd know his schedule. I'll call her down. While we waited, I noticed employees glancing our way, whispering among themselves. News of a police presence would spread quickly. A few minutes later, a young woman with dark curly hair and stylish glasses hurried into the lobby. She was dressed in a crisp white blouse and pencil skirt, looking every bit the professional assistant. Mrs. Clark, she said, her voice tinged with concern. Lieutenant, I'm Sophia Martinez, Joshua's assistant. What's happening? Is Joshua okay? Rogers introduced himself formally and asked if there was somewhere private we could talk. Sophia led us to a small conference room and closed the door behind us. Joshua is missing, I said before Rogers could begin his careful questioning. He never came home last night. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I knew something was wrong when he didn't show up or call this morning. He never misses the Phillips meetings, they're too important. When did you last see Mr. Clark? Rogers asked, taking out his notebook. Yesterday afternoon, around 5:30, Sophia replied. He was in his office, working late as usual. He seemed tense. She hesitated, glancing at me. More than usual. Did he say where he was going when he left? He mentioned stopping by his mother's house before heading home. Sophia looked at me. Did he come by? Someone came to my house, I said quietly. But I'm not sure it was Joshua. Sophia's confusion was evident, but Rogers pressed on. Ms. Martinez, has Mr. Clark been having any problems at work recently? Any conflicts or unusual behavior? Sophia fidgeted with her glasses. Well, there's the Phillips situation. What situation is that, exactly? Rogers asked. Mark Phillips, Sophia explained. He used to be Joshua's business partner, years ago, before Horizon Tech really took off. They had a falling out over an intellectual property dispute. Phillips claimed Joshua stole his idea for our flagship security software. What happened? I asked, surprised. Joshua had never mentioned this to me. Phillips sued, but lost. The court ruled that the idea had been developed jointly, but the implementation was entirely Joshua's work. Sophia's expression darkened. Phillips lost everything: his reputation, his money. He disappeared for a while, but he's back now, working for our biggest competitor, Pinnacle Industries. The name hit me like a physical blow. Pinnacle Industries, that's where Lauren works. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. Yes. She's their marketing director. Rogers wrote something in his notebook. Has there been any recent contact between Mr. Clark and Mark Phillips? They've been negotiating a potential acquisition deal, Sophia said. Horizon wants to buy out a small security firm that Phillips somehow got involved with. The meetings have been tense. Yesterday's was particularly bad. Phillips made some veiled threats. What kind of threats? Rogers asked sharply. Nothing specific. Just said something like, you'll regret turning down this offer. Clark, some things are more valuable than money. Sophia shook her head. I thought it was just negotiation tactics. And Mr. Clark's reaction. He seemed rattled, which isn't like him. After Phillips left, Joshua locked himself in his office for an hour. When he came out, he told me to reschedule today's meeting, but then changed his mind and said he'd handle it himself. She frowned. It was odd, like he couldn't make up his mind. Rogers nodded, making more notes. Anyone else we should speak with? Someone who might have insight into Mr. Clark's state of mind yesterday. Jake Turner, Sophia suggested. He's Joshua's best friend and our CTO. His office is down the hall. Jake was tall and lanky, with prematurely gray hair despite being only in his mid-30s. When he saw me, he immediately came around his desk and gave me a hug. Nancy, what's going on? There are rumors flying everywhere. After Rogers explained the situation, Jake sank into his chair, visibly shaken. I talked to him yesterday afternoon, he said. He seemed preoccupied. He asked me some strange questions. What kind of questions? Rogers prompted. About our security protocols. Who had access to what information? If I'd noticed anything unusual in the system lately. Jake ran a hand through his hair. I thought he was just being paranoid because of the Phillips negotiations. But now... Did he mention any concerns about his personal life? I asked, thinking of Lauren. Jake hesitated, glancing at Rogers. Anything you can tell us might help, Rogers assured him. Jake sighed. He mentioned that Lauren had been acting strange lately, taking calls in private, staying late at work, being evasive about her schedule. He was worried she might be... He trailed off, looking at me apologetically. Having an affair, I finished for him, my heart sinking. Jake nodded reluctantly. He didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there. He was going to confront her about it last night. My mind raced back to the strained Joshua who had appeared in my kitchen. Had that been before or after the confrontation, or had it happened at all? Lieutenant, I said suddenly, we need to find Lauren, right now. As we left Horizon Tech, my phone rang. It was Rogers' partner, Officer Chen. Lieutenant, Chen said when Rogers put him on speaker, we've got something from the traffic cameras. A car matching Lauren Clark's description was seen leaving the city limits heading toward San Gregorio around 1 a.m. last night. The image quality isn't great, but it looks like there were 2 people in the car. 2 people, Rogers repeated. Can you make out who? Not clearly. A woman driving appears to be Mrs. Clark, and a male passenger. We're trying to enhance the images now. Keep on it, Rogers said. And check if Mark Phillips has any property in San Gregorio. As Rogers ended the call, I felt sick to my stomach. 2 people in Lauren's car, heading out of town in the middle of the night, hours after Joshua supposedly came to my house. We need to search their house, I said firmly. Joshua and Lauren's. Rogers nodded. I've already got a team headed there. Let's join them. Joshua and Lauren's house was in the most exclusive neighborhood in Monte-Real, a sprawling modern structure with clean lines and huge windows. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed Lauren's sleek red sports car was indeed missing. A young officer met us at the door. No sign of forced entry, Lieutenant. The house appears undisturbed. Any signs of a struggle? Rogers asked. Nothing obvious, sir. We entered through the grand foyer. The house was immaculate, almost sterile in its perfection. Lauren's touch was evident in every carefully curated piece of furniture, every minimalist decoration. There were few photos Lauren had always said they cluttered the aesthetic. I've never been comfortable here, I admitted quietly to Rogers as we moved through the living room. It's like a museum, not a home. When was the last time you visited? He asked. About 2 months ago. Lauren hosted a dinner party for Joshua's board of directors. I smiled ruefully. She asked me to use the service entrance and stay in the kitchen, said my homespun charm wouldn't fit the professional image they were trying to project. Rogers raised an eyebrow but said nothing. We moved upstairs to the master bedroom. The king-sized bed was made perfectly, not a wrinkle in sight. His and hers closets stood on opposite walls. Lauren's was a showcase of designer clothing, each piece spaced precisely on identical hangers. Joshua's was more modest but still impeccably organized. Nothing seems out of place, Rogers mused. I opened Joshua's nightstand drawer. Inside was a small leather-bound book. His journal, I said, surprised. He's kept one since he was a teenager. Rogers pulled on a pair of latex gloves before taking it. May I? I nodded, and he carefully opened it to the most recent entry, dated the day before. Elle continues to take private calls, leaving the room when her phone rings. Rogers read aloud. Found receipts for jewelry I never received. Restaurant bills for places we've never been. When confronted, she becomes defensive, accuses me of spying, beginning to suspect connection to BP and Pinnacle deal. Need to investigate further before confronting directly. MP, I repeated. Mark Phillips. Rogers nodded grimly. Seems likely, he continued reading. Backing up sensitive files as precaution. If suspicion's correct, implications go beyond personal betrayal. Company at risk. Left copy of evidence with Sam. Told no one else yet. Not even Jake. Meeting with Elle tonight to determine truth once and for all. Sam must be Sophia Martinez, I said. We need to go back and talk to her again. Before Rogers could respond, Officer Chen called again. Lieutenant, we've got something. The vehicle registration database shows Mark Phillips owns a cabin in San Gregorio, about 45 minutes outside town. Property's been in his family for years. Pretty isolated. And there's more. Phillips made several large cash withdrawals over the past 2 weeks, totaling about $50,000. My heart pounded. That's where they've taken him. I know it. Rogers held up a hand, urging caution. Let's not jump to conclusions. We need more evidence. He turned back to Chen on the phone. Get me everything you can on that cabin location, layout, recent utility usage, and put a surveillance team in place. But tell them to maintain distance. No engagement until we have a better understanding of the situation. After hanging up, Rogers turned to me. We need to check one more thing before leaving. He led me to Joshua's home office, a space that felt more lived in than the rest of the house. Books lined the shelves. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk. A framed photo of Joshua and me at his college graduation sat in the corner, one of the few personal touches in the entire house. Rogers went straight to the desk and began checking drawers. In the bottom one, locked but easily opened with a letter opener, we found a manila envelope labeled insurance. Inside was a life insurance policy for Joshua Clark, valued at $2 million. The sole beneficiary, Lauren Adams Clark. My hands trembled as I read the document. $2 million, I whispered. That's the price of my son's life. Rogers took the policy, placing it carefully in an evidence bag. Mrs. Clark, we need to find Sophia Martinez immediately. If Joshua left evidence with her, it could be crucial. As we rushed back to the car, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mom, if you're reading this, I'm in danger. Don't trust Lauren. Evidence in safe deposit box. First National. Key in your rose garden. Under Stone Frog. Love you. I showed it to Rogers, my heart racing with hope and fear. It's from Joshua. He's alive. Rogers studied the message. When was this sent? I checked the timestamp. 3:17 a.m. That's after the car accident. After the cameras caught Lauren's car leaving town. Rogers' expression was grim but determined. Let's get to your house and find that key. The drive back to my modest home seemed to take forever. As soon as Rogers parked, I ran to the small rose garden at the side of the house, ignoring the thorns that scratched my arms as I moved the heavy stone frog that had been a gift from Joshua years ago. There, wrapped in plastic, was a small key. Rogers drove us to First National Bank, calling ahead to ensure they would cooperate with the police investigation. The bank manager led us to the safe deposit room, where the key opened box number 317. Inside was a USB drive, several photographs, and a letter addressed to me in Joshua's handwriting. The photos showed Lauren meeting with Mark Phillips in various locations, restaurants, hotels, his car. In some, they were clearly intimate, his arm around her waist, her hand on his cheek. But more damning were the images of them examining what appeared to be technical documents with the Horizon Tech logo clearly visible. Corporate espionage, Rogers murmured, examining the photos. She was passing company secrets to Phillips. The letter was brief but devastating. Mom, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Lauren has been working with Mark Phillips for months, feeding him confidential information about Horizon Tech. I discovered their affair 2 weeks ago. but only recently realized the full extent of their betrayal. The USB drive contains proof emails, bank transfers, stolen technical specifications. I confronted Lauren last night. She denied everything at first, then claimed Phillips had manipulated her, that she was afraid of him. I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm meeting with our legal team tomorrow to begin divorce proceedings and report the corporate espionage to the authorities. If anything happens to me before then, this evidence will ensure justice is served. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry for not seeing the truth sooner. Joshua. Tears blurred my vision as I folded the letter. My son was alive at least when he wrote this, but in terrible danger. Lauren hadn't just betrayed him emotionally. She and Phillips had conspired against his company, possibly against his life. Rogers was already on the phone, mobilizing his team. I want full surveillance on Phillips's cabin in San Gregorio. Satellite imagery, thermal scanning if we can get it, and put out an APB on Lauren Clark and Mark Phillips. Consider them armed and dangerous. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Mrs. Clark, I need to get you somewhere safe while we handle this. I shook my head firmly. No, my son is out there, and I'm going to help find him. You can protect me by finding Joshua. Rogers studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, but you stay with me, and you follow my instructions exactly. Understood. Understood. I agreed. Now, let's go find my son. The afternoon sun was fading as Lieutenant Rogers' car sped along the highway toward San Gregorio. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the evidence from Joshua's safe deposit box, my mind racing with a mother's worst fears. Tell me about Mark Phillips, Rogers said, breaking the tense silence. Did Joshua ever mention him before all this? I shook my head, still trying to piece together the fragments of my son's life that had been hidden from me. Never by name. He was always private about work conflicts, said he didn't want to worry me. I gave a bitter laugh. As if mothers don't worry anyway. Rogers nodded, his eyes never leaving the road. Based on what we've found, Phillips and Joshua have quite a history. Our background check shows they founded a small tech startup together right out of college, Meridian Security Solutions. Joshua never mentioned a partner when he started his business, I said, frowning. He always talked about building Horizon Tech from the ground up on his own. According to court records, their partnership dissolved about 5 years ago. Rogers continued. Phillips filed a lawsuit claiming Joshua stole his intellectual property, specifically the encryption algorithm that became Horizon's flagship product. I recalled the company's meteoric rise around that time. Joshua had been featured in technology magazines, hailed as a brilliant innovator. There had never been any mention of Mark Phillips. What happened with the lawsuit? I asked. Phillips lost. The court ruled that while the initial concept had been developed jointly, Joshua had done all the actual programming and implementation. Phillips couldn't provide any evidence that he'd contributed meaningfully to the final product. Rogers glanced at me. He lost everything: his reputation, his investment, his future in the industry. No tech company would touch him after that. The pieces were beginning to fit together. So this is revenge, I said quietly. He's using Lauren to get back at Joshua. That's part of it, Rogers agreed. But there's more. Officer Chen found that Phillips resurfaced about a year ago, working for Pinnacle Industries under a slightly altered name, Marcus Phillip. Pinnacle is Horizon's biggest competitor. And that's where Lauren works, I added, the betrayal cutting deeper. Exactly. Phillips is their director of product development, and Lauren is their marketing director. Rogers' voice hardened. They're positioned perfectly to steal Horizon's intellectual property and replicate it at Pinnacle. With Joshua out of the way, they could destroy his company and walk away with millions. My phone rang. Jake Turner calling. I put him on speaker. Nancy? Jake's voice was tense. I've been going through our system logs like the police asked. Someone's been accessing our secure development server from Lauren's home computer for months. Thousands of files downloaded, everything from customer data to our newest security protocols. Did Joshua know? I asked. I don't think so. Not until recently. There's a log entry from 2 days ago showing Joshua locked down all the high-level access codes and changed the security protocols. He left a note in the system for me to find if he didn't check in by noon today. Jake's voice cracked slightly. Nancy, he knew he was in danger. Rogers took over. Mr. Turner, we need you to preserve all that evidence and send copies to our cybercrime unit immediately. Already done, Jake confirmed. There's something else you should know. The Phillips deal that Joshua mentioned, it wasn't just any acquisition. The company they were negotiating over, Secure Key Solutions, holds patents that would essentially make Horizon's entire security platform obsolete if they fell into the wrong hands. And Phillips controls Secure Key now, Rogers concluded. Exactly. He was using the negotiations to gain insider access to Horizon while simultaneously positioning Pinnacle to launch a competing product. It's corporate espionage, plain and simple. After ending the call, Rogers turned to me. This goes beyond a love affair or even simple revenge. Phillips and Lauren were plotting to destroy everything Joshua built. The weight of the betrayal was staggering. Lauren hadn't just cheated on my son, she had systematically worked to ruin him professionally as well. Lieutenant, I said, he said, my voice steadier than I felt. What exactly did Phillips say to Joshua during their last meeting? Sophia mentioned a threat. Rogers flipped through his notes. You'll regret turning down this offer, Clark. Some things are more valuable than money. He looked up. In light of what we know now, that sounds like a thinly veiled threat against Joshua's life. My blood ran cold. We need to hurry. Rogers' phone rang. It was Officer Chen with an update. Lieutenant, we've got a hit on Lauren Clark's credit card. She bought gas at a station just outside San Gregorio about 3 hours ago. The attendant remembers her, said she seemed agitated. Kept looking over her shoulder. Was she alone? Rogers asked. No, sir. There was a man waiting in the car. The attendant couldn't see his face clearly, but described him as tall with dark hair, expensive watch. Phillips, I whispered. One more thing, sir, Chen continued. The surveillance team reports activity at Phillips's cabin. 2 people matching Lauren and Phillips's descriptions arrived about an hour ago. They're carrying supplies inside food, water, what looked like medical equipment. Medical equipment. My heart raced. Was Joshua injured, or was it something more sinister? What about thermal imaging? Rogers asked. Any sign of a third person in the cabin? Inconclusive, sir. The cabin has a basement level that's partially underground. We can't get a clear reading. Rogers' jaw tightened. Maintain surveillance, but keep your distance. We don't want to spook them. I'm calling in tactical support. We'll move in at nightfall. As we continued toward San Gregorio, Rogers' phone rang again. This time it was Emma Wilson, the financial investigator assigned to the case. Lieutenant, I've been analyzing the financial records for both Lauren Clark and Mark Phillips. Over the past 6 months, Lauren has transferred nearly $500,000 from joint accounts she shared with Joshua to a private account in her name only. $500,000? I gasped. It gets worse, Emma continued. 3 days ago, she visited their insurance company and requested information about claiming Joshua's life insurance policy. Rogers and I exchanged shocked glances. The agent she spoke with thought it was odd, but Lauren explained she was updating their estate planning documents and needed the information for their lawyer. Emma paused. Security footage from the insurance office shows she wasn't alone. Mark Phillips was with her. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Lauren and Phillips had planned to fake Joshua's death, collect the insurance money, and destroy his company. The only question was, where was my son now? The sun was beginning to set as we approached San Gregorio, casting long shadows across the winding mountain road. Rogers pulled into a small diner on the outskirts of town, where we were meeting the rest of his team before heading to the surveillance point near Phillips's cabin. We need to be careful from here on out, Rogers warned as we entered the nearly empty diner. San Gregorio is a small town. Strangers are noticed. Inside, Officer Chen was waiting with a woman I hadn't met before, tall and athletic, with short blonde hair and alert eyes that missed nothing as we approached their corner booth. Mrs. Clark, this is Detective Sarah Reynolds, Rogers introduced. She specializes in hostage situations. The word hostage sent a chill through me. Until now, I had been focusing on finding Joshua, not on what condition we might find him in. We have reason to believe your son is being held at Phillips's cabin, Detective Reynolds said without preamble. Thermal imaging is still inconclusive, but we've detected movement in the basement area that's consistent with a third person. My hands trembled as I reached for the coffee Chen had ordered for me. Do you think he's all right? Reynolds's expression softened slightly. The medical supplies they brought in suggest he's alive and they're keeping him that way. That's a good sign. It was small comfort, but I clung to it nonetheless. What's our plan? I asked. Rogers spread out a map of the area. Phillips's cabin is here, about 3 miles into the woods from the main road. It's isolated, no neighbors for at least a mile in any direction. The property has several security cameras, Chen added, pointing to markings on the map. Our surveillance team has identified their positions, but we can't guarantee they haven't set up others. Reynolds took over. We'll move in after midnight. The tactical team will approach from the west, using the tree line for cover. Our primary objective is to secure Joshua and ensure his safety. What about Lauren and Phillips? I asked. Securing the suspects is secondary to rescuing your son, Reynolds replied firmly. But rest assured, they won't be going anywhere. As they continued discussing tactical details, I studied the satellite image of the cabin. It was larger than I had imagined, more of a rustic lodge than a simple cabin, with a wraparound porch and what appeared to be a detached garage. Do we know the layout inside? I asked. Chen nodded, pulling out another diagram. Phillips's family has owned this property for generations. We found the original building plans in the county records office. The main floor has a living area, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. The basement was originally just a storage area, but it was renovated about 10 years ago to include another bedroom, bathroom, and what's labeled as a recreation room. Perfect place to hold someone, Reynolds murmured. My stomach knotted at the thought of Joshua trapped in that basement, at the mercy of a man who hated him and a woman who had betrayed him. There's something else you should see, Chen said, sliding a manila folder across the table. Inside were printouts from security cameras at various locations, restaurants, hotels, parking garages. Each showed Lauren and Mark Phillips together, dating back nearly a year. Their affair has been going on much longer than we initially thought, Rogers explained. And it wasn't just personal. Look at this one. He pointed to an image of Lauren and Phillips sitting at a restaurant table, heads bent over what appeared to be technical documents with the Horizon Tech logo clearly visible. This was taken 6 months ago, Rogers said. They've been planning this for a long time. As I stared at the evidence of Lauren's betrayal, my phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, just like before. The wooden bridge near the creek, the cabin with the blue shutters, basement, south wall, hurry. I showed it to Rogers, my heart pounding. It's from Joshua. He's telling us exactly where he is. Rogers studied the message. The numbers being bounced through multiple relays, impossible to trace. But this confirms our intel. He turned to Reynolds. We need to move our timeline up. If he's able to send messages, they might be monitoring his communications. I'll alert the tactical team, Reynolds said, already reaching for her radio. Another text came through. 2 guards, armed. Changing shifts at midnight. I showed it to Rogers, who immediately forwarded the information to the tactical team leader. Joshua's giving us critical intelligence, he said, a new urgency in his voice. We need to get into position now. As we prepared to leave, a final message appeared on my phone. Mom, if they know you found me, they'll move me or worse. Be careful. Love you. My eyes filled with tears. Even in danger, my son was thinking of my safety. Let's go get your boy, Rogers said quietly, squeezing my shoulder. We drove in convoy toward the forest that surrounded Phillips's property, parking half a mile away on a service road and continuing on foot. Despite my age, I kept pace with the officers, driven by maternal determination that surprised even me. From our vantage point in the trees, we could see the cabin, its windows glowing with warm light that belied the darkness within. 2 figures moved across the windows occasionally, Lauren and Phillips, going about their evening as if they hadn't kidnapped my son and planned to destroy his life's work. Through high-powered binoculars, I could make out Lauren's elegant silhouette as she moved past a window. She was wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater, but even from this distance, I could see the designer labels. Joshua had always been generous with her, indulging her expensive tastes without complaint. How had she repaid that generosity by conspiring with his enemy, stealing his company secrets, and now holding him captive? The thought made my blood boil. "Mrs. Clark," Reynolds whispered, "I need you to stay here with Officer Chen while the tactical team moves into position. Once we have control of the situation, we'll bring you in to identify your son." I nodded, though every maternal instinct screamed at me to run toward that cabin and find my child. As darkness fell completely, the tactical team began their approach, moving silently through the trees like shadows. Through my earpiece, I could hear their terse communications as they positioned themselves around the property. 2 subjects visible through front windows. No sign of the hostage. Exterior cameras identified and bypassed. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Then, a burst of activity on the radio. Movement at the rear entrance, female subject exiting the cabin, appears to be heading to the detached garage. Through the binoculars, I watched Lauren walk quickly across the yard, looking nervously over her shoulder. She disappeared into the garage, emerging moments later with what appeared to be a small medical kit. "She's returning to the cabin," Reynolds reported. "This matches the pattern from earlier observations. They're keeping someone alive in there." "That's my son," I whispered, a mixture of fear and hope tightening my chest. As midnight approached, the tactical team completed their preparations. Reynolds turned to me, her expression serious. "Mrs. Clark, I need to be clear about what's going to happen. When we move in, it will be fast and loud. There will be shouting, possibly flashbang grenades to disorient the suspects. No matter what you hear, you must stay here with Officer Chen until we give the all clear." "Understood," I nodded, clutching the silver locket Joshua had given me for my 60th birthday. Inside was a tiny photo of him as a child, gap-toothed and smiling. That smile had been my anchor through the years after Thomas died, the light that kept me going. "Please," I whispered, as much to myself as to Reynolds. "Bring him back to me." She squeezed my hand once, then disappeared into the darkness to join the tactical team. Minutes later, the radio crackled. "All units in position. Operation commencing on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute." The night exploded into action. The tactical team breached the cabin from multiple entry points simultaneously. Even from our position in the trees, the operation was a blur of movement and sound shouts of, "Police get down!" followed by the disorienting bang of stun grenades. Officer Chen kept a steadying hand on my arm as we watched through night vision binoculars. 2 figures were quickly subdued in the main living area, Lauren and Phillips, caught completely by surprise. The team secured them while others moved methodically through the cabin, clearing each room. Then came the words I'd been praying for. "Basement clear. We have the hostage. Repeat, we have the hostage. Medical assistance required." "Joshua," I whispered, my knees weakening with relief. "Alpha Team reports the hostage is alive." Chen confirmed, listening to his earpiece. "They're bringing him up now." I strained to see through the binoculars as the front door of the cabin opened. 2 tactical officers emerged, supporting a figure between them. Even from this distance, I recognized my son immediately. His tall frame was hunched over, his movements unsteady. He appeared to be wearing the same clothes from when I'd last seen him, or rather, when I'd seen someone I thought was him but they were disheveled and dirty. "They're bringing him to the medics," Chen said. "We'll go down once they've assessed his condition." The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched as paramedics examined Joshua, wrapped him in a thermal blanket, and started an IV. Finally, Reynolds' voice came through our earpieces. "Mrs. Clark, you can come down now. Your son is asking for you." I didn't remember running down the hill, only that suddenly I was there, pushing past officers and medics, until I reached the ambulance where Joshua sat on the tailgate, an oxygen mask covering his face. "Joshua," I cried, tears streaming down my cheeks. He looked up, his eyes so like his father's, filling with recognition and relief. He pulled the mask aside. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse and weak. "You found me." I embraced him gently, mindful of the IV in his arm and the bruises visible on his wrists where he'd been restrained. "Always," I whispered. "I will always find you." The paramedics allowed me a few moments with him before insisting they needed to transport him to the hospital. His condition was stable but concerning dehydration, mild hypothermia, contusions from being bound, and what appeared to be the after-effects of sedatives. "Mrs. Clark?" Lieutenant Rogers approached as they loaded Joshua into the ambulance. "You can ride with him. I'll meet you at the hospital after we process the scene and the suspects." "Lauren and Phillips?" I asked. "In custody. Neither is talking yet, but with the evidence we have, they won't need to." His expression was grim but satisfied. "We found everything: the stolen corporate documents, plans to fake Joshua's death, even the equipment they used to create the imposter who visited you." That reminded me of something that had been nagging at the back of my mind. "The person who came to my house, who was that now?" "We believe it was Phillips wearing prosthetics and makeup," Rogers explained. "He's about Joshua's height and build, with the right disguise and dim lighting. He could have fooled anyone, especially someone not expecting deception." The thought sent a chill through me. A stranger in my house, pretending to be my son. How close had I come to disaster without even knowing it? "Go with Joshua," Rogers urged gently. "He needs you now." In the ambulance, I held Joshua's hand as the paramedics continued their work. His fingers were cold, but his grip was strong. "I knew you'd figure it out," he murmured, his eyes fluttering with exhaustion. "When they told me about the car accident, said you believed I was dead, I knew you wouldn't give up." "Of course not," I said, stroking his hair back from his forehead. "I know my son." A ghost of a smile crossed his pale face. "Lauren never understood that, how close we are." His expression darkened. "She thought she knew everything about me, but she missed the most important parts." "Don't think about her now," I soothed. "Just rest. We'll talk when you're stronger." But Joshua's mind was clearing, the urgency of his situation giving him strength. "Mom, you need to know this wasn't just about money or revenge. They were after Horizon's new security protocol, something we've been developing in secret for months." "Jake told us about the data breach," I assured him. "The police have all the evidence." Joshua shook his head weakly. "It's bigger than that. Phillips has connections to foreign interests. This wasn't just corporate espionage, it was potentially treason." The paramedic intervened. "Sir, you need to rest. Your blood pressure is elevated." Joshua ignored him, gripping my hand tighter. They were going to keep me alive just long enough to transfer everything to their servers, then stage my suicide. Lauren had already started telling friends I was depressed, setting the groundwork. I felt sick at the calculated cruelty of it all. "How did you manage to text me?" A flicker of pride crossed his face. "They took my phone, but they didn't know about my backup. Old school tech, a tiny prepaid phone I keep for emergencies, hidden in a special pocket in my belt. I could only use it when they left me alone." The ambulance arrived at the hospital, and Joshua was quickly whisked away for treatment. I sat in the waiting room, exhausted but too wired to sleep, replaying the events of the past 24 hours in my mind. Lieutenant Rogers arrived about an hour later, looking equally tired but satisfied. "How is he?" he asked, sitting beside me. "The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. They're treating him for dehydration and monitoring him for the effects of the sedatives, but there's no permanent damage." I closed my eyes briefly in gratitude. "They're keeping him overnight for observation," Rogers nodded. "That's good news. And we have more. We've recovered Joshua's laptop from the cabin. It contains all the evidence we need to prosecute Lauren and Phillips for kidnapping, attempted murder, and corporate espionage." Joshua mentioned something about foreign connections. Roger's expression turned grave. "He's right. We found communications between Phillips and individuals associated with foreign intelligence services. The technology Joshua was developing has national security implications. The FBI has been notified and is taking over that aspect of the investigation." I shook my head in disbelief. All this time, I thought Lauren was just a bit shallow, too focused on status and appearances. I never imagined she was capable of something like this. "People can surprise you," Rogers said quietly. "For what it's worth, our initial interrogation suggests Phillips was the driving force. He approached Lauren about 6 months after she started at Pinnacle. Used his charm and the promise of wealth to turn her against Joshua. That doesn't excuse what she did, I said firmly. No, it doesn't. Rogers stood. I should get back. There's still a lot of evidence to process. Will you be all right here? I nodded. I'm not leaving until Joshua does. After Rogers left, I was allowed to see Joshua again. He was sleeping peacefully, the IV still attached to his arm, but his color was better. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand, thinking about how close I had come to losing him. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Jake Turner stood there, his face drawn with concern. Nancy, he said quietly, crossing to embrace me. How is he? He's going to be okay, I assured him, making room for Jake to sit on the other side of the bed. Jake studied his friend's face. I can't believe Lauren would do this. They seemed so perfect together. Appearances can be deceiving, I said, thinking of the immaculate house with its sterile perfection, the designer clothes, the calculated smiles at company functions. I think Lauren was playing a role from the beginning. Jake nodded slowly. Maybe, or maybe Phillips got to her, twisted her thinking. He sighed. I've been going through the company systems. The damage is extensive, but not irreparable. Most of the critical research was on isolated servers that Lauren couldn't access. What about the company? Will it survive this? Horizon Tech is stronger than they thought, Jake said with determination. We've already implemented emergency protocols to protect our clients and intellectual property. And with Joshua back, he glanced at his sleeping friend. We'll rebuild. Better than before. Joshua stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked disoriented for a moment. Then his gaze focused on Jake. You holding down the fort? He asked, his voice stronger than before. Jake grinned, relief washing over his features. You know it, though I'd appreciate it if you'd stop getting kidnapped. The paperwork is a nightmare. Joshua chuckled weakly, then winced. Where are they? He asked, his expression darkening. In custody, I assured him. Lieutenant Rogers says they have all the evidence they need. Joshua nodded, his jaw tightening. Good, because I want them to pay for what they did not just to me, but to everyone at Horizon who trusted me to protect their work and livelihoods. His determination was palpable, a glimpse of the business leader who had built a technology empire from nothing. But there was pain there too, the personal betrayal by the woman he had loved and trusted. Why didn't you tell me about your suspicions? Jake asked. I could have helped. Joshua sighed. I wasn't sure at first. I thought I might be paranoid, seeing problems where there weren't any. And when I did have proof, he trailed off, looking away. I was embarrassed. The great Joshua Clark, tech visionary, couldn't even see what was happening in his own home. Hey, Jake said firmly. This isn't on you. Lauren and Phillips were professional manipulators. They had this planned down to the last detail. Joshua turned to me, his expression softening. Mom knew something was wrong, though. Didn't you? That night, when Phillips came to the house pretending to be me, I nodded, remembering the subtle wrongness of the encounter. I sensed something was off, but I didn't realize what. If I had... Don't, Joshua interrupted. You're the reason I'm alive. You never believed their lie. You kept looking for me when everyone else was ready to accept that I was dead. His words warmed me, but I couldn't help thinking about the moment of doubt I'd had, standing in his empty bedroom, seeing the pillows arranged to look like a sleeping form. For a split second, I had questioned my own sanity, wondered if grief had made me imagine my son's visit. A mother knows her child, I said simply. Always. The door opened again, and Lieutenant Rogers entered with Detective Reynolds. Mr. Clark, Reynolds said, I'm glad to see you're recovering. We have some questions, if you're feeling up to it. Joshua nodded, sitting up straighter despite his obvious discomfort. I want to tell you everything. Over the next hour, Joshua recounted the full story of his kidnapping. He had indeed confronted Lauren about his suspicions, but instead of the denial or confession he expected, she had spiked his drink with sedatives. When he awoke, he was already in the basement of Phillips's cabin, bound to a chair. Phillips was there, gloating, Joshua said, his voice hardening at the memory. He told me everything, how he'd been planning this for years, how Lauren had been feeding him information about Horizon, how they were going to destroy everything I'd built. And the accident, the body in your car, Rogers prompted. Joshua shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. They had it all planned out. Phillips had found someone about my size and billed a homeless man who had died of natural causes. They put my wallet and watch on him, put him in my car, and pushed it off the ravine. They were counting on the fire destroying enough evidence to delay identification. And Phillips impersonating you at your mother's house, Reynolds asked. That was Lauren's idea, Joshua said bitterly. She knew Mom and I were close, that Mom would raise questions if I disappeared without seeing her. So Phillips used professional-grade makeup and prosthetics to make a brief appearance, just enough to establish that I had been alive after leaving work, but before the accident. I recalled the strangeness of that encounter, the subtle differences in mannerism and voice that had registered subconsciously, but that I hadn't fully processed at the time. What were they planning to do with you? Rogers asked the question that had been haunting me. Joshua's expression darkened. Keep me alive long enough to extract all the information they needed about Horizon's new security protocol, then stage my suicide. Lauren had already started laying the groundwork, telling friends and colleagues I had been depressed, under too much pressure. He laughed humorlessly. The devoted wife, concerned about her husband's mental health. The cold calculation of it made my blood run cold. Lauren hadn't just betrayed Joshua's trust, she had meticulously planned his destruction, personal and professional. Your mother never believed it, Rogers told him. From the moment we told her about the accident, she insisted you were alive. Joshua reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. I knew she would. That's why I managed to hold on to hope. Even in that basement, I knew my mom would move heaven and earth to find me. As the interview concluded, Rogers informed us that both Lauren and Phillips were being held without bail, facing charges of kidnapping, attempted murder, corporate espionage, and potentially treason due to the foreign connections. They won't be going anywhere for a very long time, he assured us. When we were alone again, Joshua turned to me, his expression troubled. Mom, I'm sorry for not seeing through Lauren sooner. I should have listened to my instincts and to yours. You never quite warmed to her. Did you? I hesitated, not wanting to seem like the stereotypical mother-in-law who disliked her son's wife on principle. I wanted to like her for your sake. But there was always something performative about her affection for you, like she was playing a role rather than being a partner. Joshua nodded slowly. I think I knew, deep down. There were moments when I'd catch her looking at me with this calculation in her eyes, like she was assessing my value. He sighed heavily. But I ignored it because I wanted to believe I'd found someone who loved me for me, not for what I could provide. The vulnerability in his voice broke my heart. Joshua, for all his success and confidence in business, had always been more sensitive in his personal relationships. After his father died, he had thrown himself into his studies and then his work, keeping romantic entanglements brief and superficial until Lauren came along. You'll find that person someday, I promised him. Someone who sees the real you, the boy who used to rescue spiders from the bathtub, who taught himself coding just so he could make a birthday card program for me, who still calls his mother every Sunday no matter how busy he is. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You make me sound like quite a catch. You are, I said firmly. And don't you forget it. As night fell, the hospital quieted. Joshua drifted in and out of sleep, the events of the past days catching up with him. I remained in the chair beside his bed, unwilling to leave even though the nurses had assured me he was out of danger. Around midnight, he woke with a start, his eyes wide and disoriented. Mom, he called, his voice tight with fear. I was instantly alert, taking his hand. I'm here, honey. You're safe. He relaxed visibly, his breathing slowing. I dreamed I was back in that basement. Phillips was there, telling me no one was looking for me, that everyone believed I was dead. Never, I said fiercely. I would never stop looking for you. He nodded, squeezing my hand. I know. That's what kept me going. He paused, his expression becoming more alert. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." "What is it?" "When this is all over, when I'm out of here and the company is stabilized, I want you to move in with me." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "Not in the house I shared with Lauren." He clarified quickly. "I could never live there again, but I want to buy a new place, somewhere with a garden for you, maybe near the park you like, somewhere we can both call home." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Joshua, you don't have to do that. I'm fine in my little house." "I know I don't have to," he said earnestly. "I want to. These past days have shown me what really matters, and it's not the company or the money or the status. It's family. It's you." He looked down at our clasped hands. "I almost lost everything. Mom, I don't want to waste any more time on what doesn't matter." I leaned forward and kissed his forehead, just as I had when he was a little boy with a scraped knee or a bad dream. "We'll talk about it when you're better. For now, just focus on getting well." He nodded, his eyelids growing heavy again. "Stay," he murmured. "Always," I promised, settling back in the chair as he drifted off to sleep. Outside the window, the first hints of dawn were appearing on the horizon, painting the sky with tentative strokes of pink and gold. A new day was beginning, one I had feared might come without my son in it. But he was here, safe and alive, and together we would face whatever came next. As I watched the sunrise, a sense of peace settled over me. The nightmare wasn't completely over. There would be trials and recovery and rebuilding ahead, but the worst was behind us. My son was found, and in finding him, I had discovered reservoirs of strength within myself I never knew existed. A mother's love, I reflected, was indeed the most powerful force in the world. It had guided me through the darkness when all seemed lost, helped me see truth when others saw only deception, and ultimately led me to my son when he needed me most. And that, I knew with absolute certainty, was something no one could ever take away. The morning sun streamed through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes of light across Joshua's sleeping form. I had dozed off in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, my neck stiff and my back aching. But I didn't mind. The discomfort was nothing compared to the relief of seeing my son safe. A soft knock at the door roused me fully. Lieutenant Rogers entered, looking more rested than the night before, but still carrying the intensity that seemed to be his natural state. "Mrs. Clark," he said quietly, mindful of Joshua's sleep. "How is he doing, better?" I whispered, rising to join Rogers near the door. "The doctor came by earlier. They're planning to discharge him this afternoon if his blood work comes back clear." Rogers nodded, satisfaction briefly softening his stern features. "That's good news. I have some updates for you both, but they can wait until he's awake." As if on cue, Joshua stirred, his eyes blinking open. For a moment, confusion clouded his face, then recognition and relief as he remembered where he was. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice stronger than it had been the previous day. "Tell me you have good news." Rogers pulled up a chair. "I do. Actually, we've completed our initial search of Phillips's cabin. The evidence we've gathered is substantial." "Tell us everything," Joshua requested, adjusting his bed to a sitting position. "We found your original phone, wallet, and personal effects in a locked drawer in Phillips's bedroom," Rogers began. "More importantly, we recovered 3 laptops and several external hard drives containing not only the stolen Horizon Tech data but also detailed plans for what they were calling Operation Phoenix." "Phoenix?" I asked. "Their code name for the entire scheme," Rogers explained. "The plan was multi-staged. First, steal Horizon's intellectual property. Second, eliminate Joshua and make it look like suicide. Third, launch competing products through Pinnacle Industries while simultaneously using their insider knowledge to attack Horizon's systems, creating a public security failure that would destroy consumer confidence." Joshua's jaw tightened. "And Lauren was fully on board with all of this." Rogers hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "The evidence suggests she was an active participant. Yes. However, there are some indications that Phillips was the primary architect and may have influenced her thinking over time." "Manipulated her, you mean?" Joshua said flatly. "Perhaps," Rogers conceded. But manipulation only works on willing subjects. Mr. Clark, the communications we've recovered show she was, at minimum, an enthusiastic accomplice. Joshua looked away, his expression pained. I reached for his hand, offering what comfort I could. No matter how thoroughly Lauren had betrayed him, I knew the loss still cut deep. What about the imposter who came to my house? I asked, changing the subject slightly. You said you thought it was Phillips in disguise. Rogers nodded. We found a professional makeup kit and facial prosthetics in the cabin, along with a voice modulator device. Phillips has some background in amateur theater, apparently. The plan was quite sophisticated. And the body in the car? Joshua asked. A John Doe from the county morgue, Rogers confirmed grimly. Phillips had connections with a morgue attendant who has since been arrested as an accomplice. They selected someone of similar build to Joshua, placed his personal effects on the body, then staged the accident. I shuddered at the cold calculation of it all. They had planned every detail, left nothing to chance. If not for a mother's intuition and a son's resourcefulness, they might have succeeded. There's more, Rogers continued. We've been working with the FBI's cybercrime division to trace the foreign connections Phillips maintained. It appears he wasn't just planning to sell Horizon's technology to Pinnacle, he had buyers lined up overseas as well, including entities known to be fronts for foreign intelligence services. Joshua sat up straighter, his face pale. The Dark Shield Protocol. They were after our Dark Shield Protocol. Rogers nodded, his expression grave. That's our assessment as well. The technology has significant national security implications. The FBI is treating this as a matter of highest priority. I looked between them, confused. What's Dark Shield? Joshua hesitated, glancing at Rogers, who gave a slight nod of permission. It's a quantum encryption system we've been developing in partnership with the Department of Defense. Joshua explained. It's designed to be unbreakable, even by quantum computers. If it fell into the wrong hands, it would compromise our entire national security infrastructure, Rogers finished, which elevates this case from corporate espionage to potential treason. The weight of his words hung heavy in the room. This was bigger than a betrayed husband or a company at risk. It was about national security, potentially global security. Will they talk? I asked. Lauren and Phillips. Phillips has lawyered up completely. Rogers replied so, but Lauren, he paused. She's been more cooperative. Whether out of remorse or self-preservation is hard to say. Joshua laughed bitterly. Self-preservation. Lauren always knew how to land on her feet. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Dr. Patel, a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, entered with a tablet in hand. Good news, Mr. Clark, she announced. Your blood work looks good. The sedatives are clearing your system, and your hydration levels are almost back to normal. I'm comfortable discharging you today, provided you have someone to stay with for the next 48 hours. He'll be staying with me, I said immediately. Joshua started to protest. Mom, your house is perfectly adequate, I interrupted firmly. Your old bedroom is exactly as you left it, and I can take care of you just fine. Dr. Patel smiled. That's settled, then I'll have the discharge papers prepared. You should be able to leave by early afternoon, after she left. Rogers stood. I should get back to the investigation. We'll need a formal statement from you, Mr. Clark, but that can wait until you're feeling stronger. I want to give it now, Joshua insisted. The sooner we put Lauren and Phillips away, the better. Rogers studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll send Detective Reynolds over later today. In the meantime, rest. He turned to me. Mrs. Clark, a word in the hallway. Once outside Joshua's room, Rogers's professional demeanor softened slightly. He's pushing himself too hard. Make sure he actually rests when you get him home. I will, I promised. I've had some practice dealing with stubborn Clark men. A ghost of a smile crossed Rogers's face. I don't doubt it. He hesitated, then added, There's something else you should know. We've had officers monitoring your house since this began, and they'll remain in place for the next few days, just as a precaution. A chill ran through me. You think there are others involved, people who might target Joshua. We don't believe so, but this case has taught us not to take chances. Rogers handed me his card. My direct line is on the back. Call any time, day or night, if anything concerns you. After Rogers left, I returned to Joshua's room to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, his hospital gown exchanged for the clean clothes Jake had brought by earlier. You don't have to stay with me, you know, he said, not looking up as he struggled with his shoelaces. His fingers were still clumsy from the after effects of the sedatives. I can get a hotel room. I knelt down and tied his shoes for him, just as I had when he was a little boy. Don't be ridiculous. You're staying with me. And that's final. He looked up, his eyes so like his father's, filled with a vulnerability that broke my heart. I don't want to be a burden. Joshua Clark, I said firmly. You have never been, and will never be, a burden to me. You're my son, and I'm taking you home. A few hours later, we walked slowly through the front door of my modest house. It felt different now, the space charged with memories of that night when an imposter had stood in my kitchen, when I had believed, if only for a moment, that the shape in Joshua's bed was my sleeping son. Joshua paused in the entryway, his gaze traveling over the familiar surroundings. It's good to be home, he said softly. I helped him settle on the living room sofa, propping pillows behind him and draping his favorite childhood quilt over his legs, despite his protests that he wasn't an invalid. You were kidnapped, drugged, and held captive for days, I reminded him. You're allowed to be pampered a little. He smiled reluctantly. Fine, but just for today. As I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing the chicken soup that had been my go-to comfort food for Joshua since childhood, Detective Reynolds arrived to take his statement. I offered her coffee, which she accepted gratefully, and then left them to speak privately while I continued cooking. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Joshua sitting straighter as he recounted his ordeal. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, as if the act of putting the nightmare into words was helping him reclaim his power. It started about 6 months ago. I heard him tell Reynolds. Small inconsistencies in Lauren's behavior, late nights at work that didn't match her calendar, phone calls she'd take in another room. At first, I thought... He paused. Well, the obvious. You thought she was having an affair. Reynolds supplied. Joshua nodded. But then I noticed discrepancies in our financial accounts, large withdrawals she couldn't explain, and at the same time, strange access patterns in our company systems. When did you connect the two? About 3 weeks ago. I installed a keylogger on our home computer, not something I'm proud of, but I was desperate for answers. That's when I found emails between Lauren and Phillips. His voice hardened. They weren't just sleeping together. They were conspiring to steal Horizon's technology, specifically our Dark Shield protocol. Reynolds took meticulous notes as Joshua detailed how he had gathered evidence quietly, uncertain whom he could trust within the company, preparing to confront Lauren with proof of her betrayal. The night I disappeared, he continued, I had decided it was time to act. I stopped by Mom's house first, partly to check on her, partly because, he hesitated, because I needed to remind myself of what real love looked like before I confronted the mockery my marriage had become. My heart ached at his words, at the pain Lauren had caused him. But I never made it home that night, Joshua went on. As I was leaving Mom's house, Phillips ambushed me in the driveway. He must have been watching, waiting for his opportunity. He had a stun gun. The next thing I remember, I was in that basement, tied to a chair, with Lauren and Phillips standing over me. The soup was beginning to simmer, filling the kitchen with its comforting aroma, but my appetite had vanished as I listened to my son describe his captivity, the coldness with which Lauren had treated him, the gloating satisfaction Phillips had taken in his suffering, the detailed plans they had made for his suicide once they had extracted all the information they needed. They kept me sedated most of the time, Joshua explained, but they needed me lucid enough to provide passwords, encryption keys, access to secure servers. It was a balancing act for them. And that's when you managed to send the text to your mother, Reynolds asked. Joshua nodded. They didn't know about my backup phone. Every time they left me alone, I'd work on freeing one hand enough to reach it. The messages had to be brief. I was afraid they'd catch me or notice the phone. By the time Reynolds finished taking his statement, Joshua was visibly exhausted. the circles under his eyes darker despite his rest at the hospital. I showed the detective out, thanking her for her gentleness with Joshua. "He's remarkably resilient," she commented. "Most people would be completely broken after what he's been through." "He's always been strong," I said, pride warming my voice. "Like his father." After Reynolds left, I brought Joshua a bowl of soup and sat beside him while he ate, taking comfort in the simple act of caring for my child. We didn't speak much. There would be time for more conversations later, but the silence between us was peaceful, filled with the unspoken understanding that had always bound us together. Later that evening, as dusk settled over the neighborhood, the doorbell rang. Lieutenant Rogers stood on the porch, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Clark," he said formally, "I have news I thought you'd want to hear in person." I invited him in, leading him to the living room where Joshua was resting. "Lauren has agreed to cooperate fully," Rogers announced without preamble. "She's providing details about Phillips's operation, his contacts, the extent of the information they stole. In exchange, the prosecutor may consider a reduced sentence." Joshua's face hardened. "How reduced? That's not my decision," Rogers said carefully. "But given the severity of the charges and the national security implications, even with cooperation, she's looking at a significant prison term." "And Phillips?" I asked. "Still silent, but with Lauren's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, it won't matter. He'll be going away for a very long time." Roger's expression softened slightly. "I thought you'd want to know that justice is being served." After Rogers left, Joshua sat in silence for a long time, staring at the family photos on the mantelpiece, snapshots of happier times, of a family intact and untouched by betrayal. "I should have seen it coming," he said finally, his voice low. "There were so many warning signs." I moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in mine. "Love makes us blind sometimes." "It wasn't just love," he admitted. "It was pride. I couldn't believe that someone like Lauren, beautiful, accomplished, seemingly devoted, could be using me." The great Joshua Clark. Too smart to be fooled. He laughed bitterly. "Turns out I was the biggest fool of all." "You weren't a fool," I said firmly. "You were a good man who believed in the goodness of others. That's not foolishness. Joshua, it's humanity." He squeezed my hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "What would I do without you, Mom?" "Thankfully," I said. "You'll never have to find out." The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm as Joshua recovered his strength. Each morning, we shared breakfast on the back patio, watching the birds in the garden. Each afternoon, he would work remotely for a few hours, reconnecting with his company, while I busied myself with household tasks. Each evening, we sat together in the living room, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the quiet companionship. It was a healing time for both of us. Joshua processing the betrayal that had nearly cost him everything. Me grateful for the second chance to have my son in my life. A week after his rescue, Joshua received a visit from Jake Turner and Sophia Martinez, bringing updates on Horizon Tech's recovery efforts. "The damage is contained," Jake reported, spreading charts and graphs across the kitchen table. "We've implemented new security protocols, revoked all compromised access codes, and notified our government partners about potential vulnerabilities." "And the Dark Shield project?" Joshua asked. "Safe," Sophia assured him. "We followed your contingency protocols to the letter. The core algorithm was never compromised." Relief washed over Joshua's face. "What about our clients? Has news of the breach gone public?" Jake and Sophia exchanged glances. "Not yet," Jake said carefully. "We've kept it quiet while the investigation continues. But Joshua, we'll need to disclose eventually. Transparency is part of our corporate values." Joshua nodded, determination hardening his features. "We'll make a full disclosure once the investigation permits. No cover-ups, no spin. Horizon Tech will face this head-on." I watched from the doorway, pride swelling in my chest. Despite everything he'd endured, Joshua's integrity remained unshaken. After his colleagues left, Joshua joined me in the garden, where I was tending to my roses, the same garden where we had found the key to his safe deposit box. "You've kept it beautiful," he commented, kneeling beside me despite his still recovering strength. "Dad would be proud," I smiled, remembering how Thomas had planted these roses for our 10th anniversary. He always said a garden was a promise to the future, that you had to believe in tomorrow to plant something today. Joshua ran his fingers along a vibrant red bloom. "I'm thinking a lot about tomorrow these days, about what I want the rest of my life to look like." "And what have you decided?" I asked, setting down my gardening shears. "That I need to rebuild not just the company, but myself." He looked at me, his eyes clear and determined. "I let Horizon become my whole identity. I worked 80-hour weeks, missed family gatherings, convinced myself that success would bring happiness. And now I know better." He took my hand, his grip firm. "I meant what I said in the hospital. Mom, I want us to live together not because you need taking care of, but because I do. Because family is what matters." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Joshua, let me finish," he said gently. "I've been looking at properties. There's one just outside town, near the lake, 5 acres, a beautiful old farmhouse with plenty of room for both of us to have our own space, and the most amazing garden you've ever seen. I could picture it a peaceful retreat where we could both heal, where Joshua could find balance between his work and his life, where I could continue my gardening on a grander scale. We could be moved in by Christmas," he continued, enthusiasm brightening his face in a way I hadn't seen since before the kidnapping. "What do you say?" How could I refuse the hope in his eyes? "I say it sounds wonderful." 2 days later, Lieutenant Rogers called with news. The preliminary hearing for Lauren and Phillips had been scheduled, and the prosecutor wanted to meet with Joshua to prepare for his testimony. "Will you come with me?" Joshua asked as we drove to the courthouse. "I don't think I can face her alone." "Of course," I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "You don't have to face any of this alone." The courthouse was a grand old building in the center of town, its marble steps worn by generations of footsteps. Inside, we were directed to a conference room where Assistant District Attorney Elena Ramirez waited with Lieutenant Rogers and Detective Reynolds. "Mr. Clark?" Ramirez greeted us, her handshake firm. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy." Joshua nodded, his jaw tight. "I want to see this through, for justice and for closure." "And you'll have both," Ramirez promised. "The evidence against Phillips and your wife is overwhelming. With your testimony—" "Ex-wife," Joshua corrected. "I've filed for divorce." "Of course," Ramirez amended smoothly. "With your testimony, we have an airtight case." She laid out the charges: kidnapping, attempted murder, corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, and potentially treason once the federal investigation concluded. The potential sentences were substantial decades in prison for both defendants. "Lauren has continued to cooperate," Ramirez informed us. "She's provided details about Phillips's foreign contacts that have been extremely valuable to the FBI. In return, we've agreed to recommend a sentence at the lower end of the guidelines." Joshua's expression darkened. "How low?" 15 to 20 years, Ramirez clarified. "Still a significant sentence. Mr. Clark, she won't walk away from this." He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "And Phillips, he's facing 30 to life. No deals for him." As we discussed the details of the upcoming hearing, a court officer knocked on the door. "Ms. Ramirez, the defendants are being brought in for their own preparation. You'll want to clear the corridor." Ramirez stood. "We'll go out the back way. No need for confrontation at this stage." But as we gathered our things, the door opened and there stood Lauren, flanked by guards, her attorney beside her. The room froze in silence. Lauren, usually so polished and perfect, looked diminished in her prison jumpsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face devoid of makeup. Yet even now, there was a calculated quality to her vulnerability, as if she were playing a role. Her eyes locked with Joshua's, and for a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then Lauren took a step forward. "Joshua," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry." Joshua's face was like stone. Save it for the judge. Please, she persisted, ignoring her attorney's warning hand on her arm. You have to believe me. Mark manipulated me, threatened me. I never wanted to hurt you. A bitter laugh escaped Joshua. You planned my murder, Lauren. You were going to collect $2 million from my life insurance and destroy my company. Don't insult my intelligence by claiming you were an unwilling participant. Lauren's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I made a terrible mistake, got in over my head. Enough, Ramirez interrupted sharply. Ms. Clark, your statement to my office directly contradicts what you're saying now. Are you changing your story? Lauren's attorney intervened. My client is emotional. This meeting was not scheduled. Take her back, Ramirez instructed the guards. And counsel, remind your client that our cooperation agreement depends on her complete honesty. As the guards led Lauren away, she looked back once, her eyes finding not Joshua, but me. There was something in her gaze, a plea, perhaps, or simply the recognition that she had lost everything she had schemed to gain. After she was gone, Joshua released a shuddering breath. Well, that was unexpected. Are you all right? I asked softly. He nodded, his composure returning. Better than I expected, actually. Seeing her like that, it helped me realize she has no power over me anymore. Lieutenant Rogers, who had observed the exchange in silence, spoke up. People like Lauren and Phillips think they're untouchable, that the rules don't apply to them. Facing consequences is often the first reality check they've ever had. And sometimes the last, Joshua added grimly. As we left the courthouse, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier. I opened my umbrella, holding it over both of us as we hurried to the car. What Lauren said, I ventured carefully as Joshua drove through the rain-slicked streets, about being manipulated by Phillips. Do you think there's any truth to it? Joshua was quiet for a long moment, his focus seemingly on the road. Maybe, he admitted finally. Phillips is clever, charismatic in his way, and he had years to perfect his revenge plan. But I prompted, sensing his hesitation. But Lauren is one of the most self-determined people I've ever met. She built her career through sheer force of will. The idea that she was some helpless pawn? He shook his head. It doesn't ring true. People can be complex, I offered. Perhaps she was both willing participant and victim in different ways. Joshua considered this. Perhaps, but in the end, she made her choices, just as I'm making mine now. That evening, as we sat in the living room listening to the rain against the windows, Joshua seemed lost in thought, turning his wedding ring around his finger. He had continued wearing it despite everything, a habit he hadn't yet broken. Without a word, he slipped the ring off and placed it on the coffee table. I won't be needing this anymore. I covered his hand with mine. One chapter ends, another begins. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Speaking of new chapters, I have good news. The lake house I told you about, I made an offer, and it was accepted. We can move in next month if you're still interested. I am, I assured him. But Joshua, are you sure this is what you want? Living with your mother isn't exactly the bachelor lifestyle you might need after everything that's happened. He laughed. Trust me, Mom, the last thing I need right now is dating. What I need is family, stability, a reminder of what real love looks like. He squeezed my hand. Besides, the house is big enough that we won't be in each other's way. You'll have your garden, I'll have my home office, and we'll both have peace. Peace? It sounded wonderful after the storm we had weathered. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived crisp and clear, the autumn air carrying a hint of the winter to come. Joshua stood before the mirror in his old bedroom, adjusting his tie with hands that trembled slightly. You don't have to do this, I reminded him, watching from the doorway. Ramirez said your written statement would be sufficient at this stage. He shook his head, his reflection meeting my gaze. I need to be there, to look them in the eye, to show them they didn't break me. At the courthouse, we were ushered into a side room to wait. Joshua sat straight-backed and composed, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightness around his eyes, This would be the first time he faced both Lauren and Phillips together since his ordeal. Lieutenant Rogers joined us briefly. "Just wanted to wish you luck," he said. "The evidence speaks for itself, but your presence matters. Mr. Clark, it puts a human face on what could otherwise become a technical case about corporate espionage." Joshua nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant, for everything." Rogers turned to me. "Mrs. Clark, I've arranged for you to have a seat in the front row, right behind your son." "I appreciate that," I said warmly. "I want him to know I'm there." "He's lucky to have you," Rogers said, his usually stern expression softening. "Not everyone has that kind of support." When we entered the courtroom, it was already crowded reporters, curious members of the public, and what appeared to be other Horizon Tech employees, including Jake and Sophia. They nodded encouragingly as Joshua took his seat at the prosecution table. I settled into my place directly behind him, close enough to touch his shoulder if he needed reassurance. The doors at the side of the courtroom opened, and Lauren was led in, followed by Phillips. Both wore prison jumpsuits, their hands cuffed before them. Lauren's head was bowed, her hair falling forward to partially obscure her face. Phillips, by contrast, walked with his head high, his expression defiant. As they were seated at the defense table, Lauren glanced over her shoulder, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. There was something unreadable in her gaze. Regret, perhaps, or simply calculation. Phillips never looked our way. His attention focused entirely on his attorney, a sleek, expensive-looking man in a tailored suit who exuded confidence. The hearing proceeded with formal efficiency. The charges were read, the evidence summarized. Joshua watched impassively as Ramirez detailed the kidnapping, the imposter who had visited my house, the plans for his staged suicide, the theft of corporate secrets, and the connections to foreign entities. When it was time for Joshua to speak, he rose with quiet dignity. His voice, though soft at first, grew stronger as he recounted his ordeal, sparing no detail of the betrayal by his wife and the cruelty of his former business partner. "They didn't just try to steal my company's technology," he concluded, his gaze sweeping from the judge to the defendants. "They tried to steal my life, my reputation, my future. They were willing to destroy everything I had built, everyone who depended on me, for their own gain." Phillips remained stone-faced throughout, but Lauren seemed to shrink with each word, her shoulders hunching as if under a physical weight. The defense attorneys made their arguments claims of insufficient evidence, suggestions that Joshua had misinterpreted events, attempts to minimize the seriousness of the charges. Phillips's lawyer was particularly aggressive, portraying his client as a wronged businessman seeking legitimate compensation for intellectual property theft. "Mr. Phillips merely sought justice for the theft of his ideas," the attorney claimed. "Any actions he took were motivated by a desire to reclaim what was rightfully his." Joshua's hand clenched into a fist at these words, but he remained outwardly calm. When the arguments concluded, the judge looked at both defendants. "Based on the evidence presented, I find probable cause to believe that the defendants committed the crimes charged. This matter will proceed to trial. Bail is denied for both defendants, who will remain in custody." As the gavel fell, a collective exhale seemed to pass through the courtroom. Joshua's shoulders relaxed slightly, the first phase complete. Lauren and Phillips were led away, but as they reached the door, Lauren turned, her eyes finding Joshua. "I'm sorry," she mouthed, the words silent but clear. Joshua did not respond, his gaze steady but distant, as if she were already a memory rather than a presence in his life. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered, microphones extended. Joshua had prepared a brief statement, which he delivered with composure. "Today is not about vengeance but justice," he said. "Horizon Tech will continue to innovate, to serve our clients, and to protect the security technologies that safeguard millions of people worldwide. We are stronger than any attempt to destroy us." In the car afterward, driving away from the media frenzy, Joshua finally allowed his facade to crack. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, and he pulled over abruptly, unable to continue. "I didn't think it would be that hard," he admitted, his voice hoarse. Seeing them together, hearing Phillips's lawyer twist everything. I placed my hand over his. You did beautifully. With strength and dignity, he took a deep breath, steadying himself. When Lauren said she was sorry, do you think she meant it? I don't know, I answered honestly. But it doesn't change what she did. Joshua nodded, his composure returning. No, it doesn't. And I can't waste any more energy trying to understand her. He straightened, putting the car back in drive. It's time to focus on the future. The future arrived sooner than expected. 2 weeks after the hearing, we stood in the driveway of the lake house, our new home. The old farmhouse was everything Joshua had described, spacious without being ostentatious, warm with history but updated for modern comfort, and surrounded by the most magnificent gardens I had ever seen. What do you think? Joshua asked anxiously as we walked through the front door into a sunlit foyer. It needs some personal touches, but the bones are good. It's perfect, I said, she said, taking in the wide planked hardwood floors, the exposed beams, the massive stone fireplace in the living room. Absolutely perfect. He showed me through the house with boyish enthusiasm the gourmet kitchen with its farmhouse sink and butcher block counters, the cozy library lined with built-in shelves, the sunroom overlooking the lake. And this, he said, opening a door off the main hall, is your suite. I gasped at the beautiful space before me, a large bedroom with windows on 3 sides, a sitting area with a small fireplace, a luxurious bathroom, and a door leading to a private patio overlooking the rose garden. Joshua, this is too much, I protested. It's not enough, he countered. Not after everything you've done for me. He took my hands in his. Mom, I almost lost my life. That kind of experience changes your perspective. I don't want to waste any more time on the wrong things or the wrong people. I want to be surrounded by love, by family. Tears filled my eyes. Then you will be. The move happened quickly. Joshua hired professionals to pack and transport our belongings. But there were certain items I insisted on handling myself, Thomas's old records, Joshua's childhood artwork, the family photo albums that chronicled our journey together. As I sorted through these treasures in my little house, Lieutenant Rogers stopped by for what he called a welfare check. Just making sure everything's going smoothly, he said, accepting the cup of tea I offered. The trial won't begin for several months, but we want to ensure you and your son remain safe. We're doing well, I assured him. Joshua is healing physically and emotionally. The new house is helping. A fresh start. Rogers nodded, his usual sternness softened by what appeared to be genuine concern. Good. He's a strong man. Not everyone would recover so quickly from such a betrayal. He gets that from his father, I said, smiling at a memory. Thomas always said life was too short for bitterness, that holding on to anger was like drinking poison yourself and expecting the other person to die. Wise man. Rogers hesitated, then added, Mrs. Clark, there's something else you should know. Lauren has provided information that led to the identification of Phillips's foreign contacts. Several arrests have been made. That's good news, I said cautiously, sensing there was more. It is. And in light of her cooperation, the prosecutor is considering a further reduction in the charges against her. He held up a hand as I began to protest. Not a dismissal, she'll still serve time, but the treason charges may be dropped in exchange for her continued cooperation. I considered this, torn between my desire for justice and my recognition that Lauren's information could protect national security. Does Joshua know? Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Gauge how he might react. I appreciated his thoughtfulness. He'll be angry at first, but he'll understand the bigger picture. Joshua has always put the greater good ahead of his personal feelings. Rogers nodded. That's what I thought. I'll speak with him tomorrow. The next day, as Joshua and I continued setting up our new home, Lieutenant Rogers visited to share the news about Lauren's cooperation deal. As I had predicted, Joshua was initially upset, but his anger quickly gave way to pragmatism. If her information saves lives or protects national security, then it's worth it, he concluded. Besides, she'll still be in prison, just not for as long as Phillips. You're taking this better than I expected, Rogers admitted. Joshua looked around at our new home, at the fresh start we were building together. I've realized something. Lieutenant, Lauren and Phillips don't deserve any more of my energy. They've already taken enough. As Rogers was leaving, he paused at the door. You know, Mrs. Clark, you should consider writing a book about all this. It's quite a story. I laughed, surprised by the suggestion. I'm not a writer. Maybe not, but you have a perspective no one else does. The mother who never gave up, who knew her son was alive when everyone else believed he was dead. He shrugged. Just a thought. After he left, I found Joshua in the garden, planting bulbs that would bloom in the spring. I joined him, kneeling on the soft earth, my hands working alongside his. Do you think we'll be happy here? He asked, pressing a bulb into the soil. I looked at my son thinner than before his ordeal, with new strands of gray at his temples, but his eyes clear and forward-looking. I looked at our beautiful new home, at the peaceful lake beyond, at the garden that would flourish under our care. Yes, I said with certainty. I think we'll be very happy. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, we returned to the courthouse for the final day of Lauren and Phillips's trial. The garden at the lake house was blooming with the tulips and daffodils we had planted together, a vibrant symbol of renewal that gave me strength as we prepared to face this last chapter of our ordeal. The trial had been lengthy, with weeks of testimony from technical experts, financial investigators, and cybersecurity specialists. Joshua had been a key witness, his testimony powerful in its simplicity and emotional impact. I had taken the stand as well, describing the night the imposter had come to my house and my certainty that the body in the car accident was not my son. Now, after days of deliberation, the jury had reached their verdict. The courtroom was packed as we took our seats. Joshua, handsome in a navy suit, sat with perfect posture, his expression composed. I sat directly behind him, as I had throughout the trial, my hand occasionally reaching forward to touch his shoulder in moments of difficulty. Jake and Sophia were present as well, along with several other Horizon Tech employees who had become Joshua's support system during the rebuilding of both his company and his life. The defendants were led in. Phillips looked much as he had at the beginning of the trial, defiant, almost arrogant, as if he still believed he could somehow escape the consequences of his actions. Lauren, by contrast, appeared diminished, her designer confidence replaced by a fragile solemnity that seemed, to my surprise, genuine. As the judge entered and everyone rose, Joshua reached back, briefly squeezing my hand. No words were necessary. We both knew what this moment meant, the closure it would bring. Will the defendants please rise? The judge instructed once everyone was seated. Lauren and Phillips stood, their attorneys beside them. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The foreperson, a retired teacher with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the count of kidnapping in the first degree, how do you find? We find the defendant, Mark Phillips, guilty. We find the defendant, Lauren Clark, guilty. Joshua remained perfectly still, but I saw the slight rise of his shoulders as he took a deep breath. The verdicts continued guilty on all counts for Phillips, guilty on most counts for Lauren, with the treason charges dropped as part of her cooperation agreement. When the final guilty verdict was read, a collective exhalation seemed to pass through our side of the courtroom. It was over. Justice had been served. The judge thanked the jury, then turned to the defendants. Sentencing will be scheduled for next month. Until then, the defendants will remain in custody. As Lauren was led away, she turned, her eyes seeking Joshua, for the first time since the betrayal. He met her gaze directly, unflinchingly. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps of the end of their chapter together. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine bathed the steps in golden light. Joshua stood before the assembled media, delivering a brief statement. Today, justice has been served, he said, his voice steady. Horizon Tech will continue its mission of creating secure technology that protects our clients and our nation. We are grateful to law enforcement, the prosecution team, and everyone who supported us through this difficult time. As reporters shouted questions, Joshua held up a hand. I have just one more thing to add. The real hero of this story isn't me, it's my mother, Nancy Clark. When everyone else believed I was dead, She knew I was alive. Her love and determination saved my life. He reached for my hand, drawing me forward to stand beside him. Never underestimate the power of a mother's love. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment mother and son, survivors together. That evening, we celebrated quietly at the lake house with Jake, Sophia, and Lieutenant Rogers, who had become a friend over the course of the investigation and trial. To justice, Jake proposed, raising his glass. And to new beginnings, Joshua added, his smile reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't for months. As the others chatted, Rogers joined me on the porch, where I had stepped out to admire the sunset over the lake. "You should be proud," he said. His usual gruffness softened. "Not just of Joshua, but of yourself. Not many people would have had your instincts or your courage." I smiled, watching the golden light dance across the water. "A mother knows her child, always." "Have you thought any more about writing that book?" he asked. I laughed. "Actually, I have. Joshua bought me a laptop and set it up in the sunroom. I've been working on it in the mornings, just for myself, really." "I'd read it," Rogers said with unexpected earnestness. "It's a story worth telling." Inside, Joshua was laughing at something Sophia had said, the sound floating through the open windows. It was a sound I had feared I might never hear again, and its simple joy brought tears to my eyes. "Lieutenant," I said, turning to face him, "thank you. For believing me when it would have been easier not to. For finding my son when others had given up." He nodded, a hint of emotion breaking through his professional reserve. "Just doing my job, Mrs. Clark?" "Nancy," I corrected gently. "After everything we've been through, I think we can use first names." "Stephen," he offered in return, extending his hand. As we shook hands, Joshua appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay out here?" "Perfect," I assured him. "Just thanking Stephen for all he's done." Joshua nodded, his expression warm. "We owe you a debt we can never repay, Lieutenant." "You've done more than enough," Rogers assured him. "Bringing Phillips and his network to justice has made our country safer. That's payment enough." After our guests departed, Joshua and I lingered on the porch, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The evening was peaceful, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the distant call of a whippoorwill. "I've been thinking," Joshua said after a comfortable silence, "about what comes next." "And what have you decided?" I asked. "Horizon Tech is stable again. The new security protocols are stronger than ever. Jake and Sophia have proven themselves more than capable of running day-to-day operations." He turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "I'm considering stepping back a bit, taking on more of an advisory role." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. Before the kidnapping, Horizon had been Joshua's life, his passion, his identity. "Are you sure you've worked so hard to build that company?" "I'm sure," he said with quiet confidence. "The past year has taught me that there's more to life than work. I want to explore other interests, give back to the community, maybe even start a foundation to help victims of corporate crimes." Pride swelled in my heart. My son had emerged from his ordeal not broken, but transformed stronger, wiser, more balanced in his priorities. "I think that sounds wonderful," I said. "Your father would be so proud of the man you've become." Joshua smiled, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I hope so." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I know one thing for certain: I wouldn't be here without you, Mom. Not just because you found me when I was kidnapped, but because you've always shown me what true strength looks like." We stood together in comfortable silence, mother and son, survivors of a storm that had threatened to destroy us but had ultimately made us stronger. In the distance, a loon called across the lake, its haunting cry a reminder of both the fragility and the resilience of life. The future stretched before us, not without challenges, perhaps, but filled with the promise of healing, of growth, and of the enduring power of love. "What would you have done?" Joshua asked softly. "If they had convinced you I was dead, if you had given up looking for me?" I turned to him, my answer coming without hesitation. "That would never have happened. A mother knows her child, and I would have searched for you until my last breath." He nodded, satisfied with this truth that had saved his life. "I believe you." Together, we watched as the moon rose over the lake, casting a silver path across the water, a path leading forward, into whatever tomorrow might bring. I'm glad you followed my story until the end. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. While you're at it, check out 2 other stories that are channel favorites, linked in the description below.